And now, with that energy, I want to invite everybody to participate of the last plenary of the day and the last activity of the day. Indeed, risk. What do we really know? What do we really need to know to take action? And I want to invite my friend Shanna McClain to help us moderate this session. She is the head of the disaster management program at NASA. Please, you can sit. And we need a microphone. Where are the karaoke guys? They took the microphone. They are going to sing. Huh? No, we will call the other ones as well. Obrigado. We have connected from Wellington in New Zealand, Nicolas Pondard. I don't know if we can see him, but, and then also we have Renato. Oh, Nico.
Hey, how are you?
Data is just simply not enough. It's about a variety of issues that are really going to be driving how we use the data, whether the decisions we make are accurate, and whether they're getting us the outcomes that we need in order to help people, prepare and reduce risk to a variety of disasters. And so the goal today is to have our speakers share some insights with you on their approaches and thoughts in relation to these challenges, right? The fact that risk assessments need hard to find data. I mean, maybe there's information on the hazard. That's what NASA provides a lot of, as well as other space agencies and a lot of the private sector that we have with us today. But also, we need information on exposure, we need information on vulnerability. And as we drive down into things like vulnerability, things become more and more disconnected. They're harder to get access to, and it's a lot harder to interpret and understand what to do. And I would say, one of the things we've been faced with today as a perfect example, or across this week, is, what the entire understanding risk group of people that are putting all of this event together have faced, right? They talked to the national hydromet agencies around here about the weather that's going on? Absolutely they have. But what do they really need to make a decision? Do they have all the information? And even in the most perfect environment where they've been given everything they need, how do they really get from the information they've been given to the decisions that are going to protect us, keep us dry, and still happy while we're here for the week in Brazil? So the first question that I'm going to ask of each of the speakers today is about this, this trade-off, as I see it anyways. So we know that data on vulnerability and asset exposure is important for understanding risk and making informed decisions, but everyone always, well, at least tells me, but I need more data. I don't have enough data. And it's really weird to me because I think there's way too much data. It's really not the data that's the issue. So my question to my colleagues here is, in your experience, is greater access to data the challenge, or is it the lack of harmonization between qualitative data, such as social and economic information, and quantitative data, such as average annual loss or number of damaged buildings, that reduces the efficacy of risk maps and products? And it doesn't have to be either or, but understanding how you approach this balance between quantitative and qualitative data and what's going to really drive your decision in the end is what I'm asking here. So maybe I can start with you since you're in person, and then I'll move to Nico and then to Renato.
Okay, thank you very much. Maybe I can speak language. Creo que en realidad toda la información que se obtiene es necesaria. Sin embargo, sí debemos de encontrar un balance entre toda esa información que puede volverse redundante y la información de calidad, como dice. Si pudiésemos sistematizar esta información, pues sería algo bastante importante y relevante, porque por un lado sí poseemos la información acerca del riesgo, sin embargo no poseemos información acerca de la vulnerabilidad. Entonces sí creo que es más importante la la calidad de la información que la cantidad de esta. Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Nico, do you have some thoughts on this?
Yes, definitely. And hi, everyone. Good to see you all. And greetings from New Zealand. So where we're hosting the UR22 hub. So very happy to see you and to be able to be connected. So to answer to your question, I think, yeah, in my view, it's definitely an issue of harmonization. Because as you mentioned, Shanna, there is definitely amazing access to data now, and over the past 10 years, there's been amazing progress being done. Should it be, for example, from the collection of satellite information through initiatives like hosted by Planet and others. There's been amazing initiatives being around. However, there's definitely been a lack of coordination. And I think for me, the issue comes from the fact that a lot of initiative when it comes to collecting risk data is done without a specific objective in mind and without a specific purpose. So people collect vulnerability information here, hazard data there, but sometimes it's just not fit for purpose. It does not necessarily target the appropriate groups. And for a long time, for example, there was a focus maybe on economic impact of natural disasters, looking at the GDP impact, while today, for example, if we want to target vulnerable communities, we know that actually we need to use other metrics, other indicators. And so I think today we struggle with actually a lot of information and not being able to do what to do with it, because it's like a pieces of puzzle where you have different pieces, but they don't fit with each other. So I think this is really where the issue is right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. Renato, I saw that you left a message. Are you hearing better or? So I'll try to be clear, and if nothing else, maybe we can figure out an alternate way to get questions to you. But were you able to hear the question? Would you like to respond? Are you guys helping with this, or? So he can't hear the question or speak, I don't think. No? Okay. Oh.
But if there's interpretation, it overlaps.
Who do we work with to get? I think he was having a hard time hearing the question. He said the voices were overlapping. No. Okay.
Well, there are overlapping words.
Renato, we're going to try to figure out the issue with sound, and so we're going to go to the next question until we can make sure that you hear everything and are able to participate with us. So just give us a second, and hopefully we can figure out what the issue is. How to understand where investment should be going. When we are approaching understanding risk, preparing for different types of disasters, we know that people need to understand, where is the disaster going to happen? Where are the impacts most likely to be? Which buildings are most likely to be affected? And really, how many lives are going to be lost? What type of impact are we expecting to see? And so when trying to understand what is needed, like either the difference between detailed risk information or more holistic approaches to managing risk, what is more likely to be the better financial investment, and how do we figure out where to put our money and our time when trying to improve understanding risk? Nico, do you want to start us off this time? And maybe we can see if Renato is able to hear us yet.
Yes, sure. So I can have a try at that. So I think actually even more than trying to get access to detailed information, first we need to start with having a transparent and a holistic process, as you were mentioning. And I think that's the key issue. So we need to be able to co-design risk assessment strategies along with decision makers in order to build transparency and to build trust. And I think this transparency and that trust is more important than actually being able to access detailed information. Then, of course, getting access to detailed information that is fit for purpose, then is, of course, important, because then you need to have the appropriate geographic resolution in order to assess a specific issue. But also, there's also the timeliness of the data. So if you want to be better prepared to a disasters, you need to have the information long in advance, maybe years in advance, in order to be prepared. So to me, I think I would simply say that depending on what you're trying to achieve, do you want to do a risk financing strategy, or do you want to be better prepared for emergency response and deploy equipment to target to a specific place? There will be then a specific geographic resolution that is needed for that job that is actually quite variable. However, at the end of the day, what I realize is that no matter what we do, even if we do the best assessment, it's sometimes not used, simply for the simple reason that it's just not transparent and there's just no trust between the decision maker and us. So to me, I think we should be starting on that realm. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nico. I appreciate your answer. Timeliness is also an interesting issue, right? Because I think sometimes in an effort to be timely, we're losing other things. And so there's a constant trade-off almost, with whether or not, more timely decision is giving us like the accuracy we need, right? Or vice versa. Renato, it looks like you can hear us now maybe a little bit better. I'll try to see if I can maybe dim the noise a bit if I cover my microphone, but would you like to take a shot at this question?
Well, essentially, when we want to discuss warning to people, there are several components that must be very clear. It's for them to understand the hazards that they can be affected with and identify how these hazards can affect them. And second is to provide the trigger for the occurrence of the hazards. So generate an online platform where you can actually assess the hazards of your area or anywhere in the Philippines in less than 1 minute. You use your phone, you tap the screen of your computer or phone, and within 30 seconds, you'll be able to get all the possible hazards that area can be affected with. So they have the hazards. Second would be to make sure that they understand the triggers for these different hazards, and this would be provided by the mandated warning organizations, either the Weather Service or the Geological Organization. And that is done through level systems where corresponding action plans are formulated by the local government units and the residents.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Renato. So as you all are probably likely aware, there's a very large lag and delay in between the questions that I'm asking and what Renato can hear. So at NASA, I'm pretty used to this. Our technology, you would think, is quite advanced, but like we're still using some really interesting things. So hopefully we can all be patient as we work through this. Would you like to also answer this? We will we'll work this out. So thank you very much. Okay, so the third question is about partnership, which for me, I think is very important. So most of what we do can't be done in an echo chamber where we don't learn about the other perspectives of our partners, of people living in different communities that are experiencing differentiating issues, right? Things that are inherently making them more susceptible or vulnerable or exposed to different events. And so understanding that together we are stronger, governments need to coordinate better with producers of data, but also with different institutions that have different approaches to understanding risk in order to make rapid and more informed decisions and to better prepare for and respond to disasters. In this sense, from each of you, it would be great to hear two questions. First, what are the main channels that you use for coordinating across different sectors, across different agencies, if you're in a government institution? And how do you think this coordination could be improved? Nico, would you like to take this next question?
Yes, sure. Happy to have a try. Having said that, I think my colleagues sitting in government definitely have better answers than me. But I would say, me as being a scientist and a provider of scientific evidence, the channel that we tend to use is that we try to see a system that is coordinating at national level, then regional level, and then at local level. And so in New Zealand, for example, we have the National Emergency Management Agency that coordinates at national level all risk management actions. And so what we do is that we do provide scientific evidence to them. Having said that, then this information is also distributed to the provincial level that is in charge of actually implementing those risk management actions. And we also feed to this person's scientific evidence. So this is kind of the system where all the roles and responsibilities are established. And basically, we try to make it work as well as possible. How we could improve this, I think what's missing here again is actually involving the local communities themselves, actually, the vulnerable, the minorities, the people that actually, the victims actually of natural hazards. And I feel we could do a better job at getting them at the table and being able to communicate information to them in a more efficient way. So that's one aspect. And a second aspect, I think channel that I would like to see are actually channel that survive the various succession of governmental institutions, because as you may know, in central government, people have a mandate for 2, 3, 4 years, and then people change. And so we need to be able to keep those connections and those communication, because when we have to face somebody new, then we have to start all over again and establish this trust I was talking about and doing the sort of aspects. So if we could have a mechanism that survives the various successions of governmental institutions, something that would help. Thank you.
Oh, I think it's also interesting because speaking from a scientific institution, a lot of the challenges we face, while definitely turnover from administrations, et cetera, it's also about the fact that our science is based on, well, we are a grant-making institution. And so we're funding activities with partners for 4 or 5 years, but once that activity is no longer funded, what happens to the partnership? Does it dissolve? You know, is the scientific capability that was developed, has it been integrated and really absorbed and sustained by our partner? Like, have we done what we needed to do in order to build the capacity for people to maintain things beyond, you know, just 4 or 5 years that they're funded to do? So I think there's a lot of angles to what you were mentioning, which is really great. Renato, are you still with us? Would you like to also answer this question? Okay, I think Renato had a lot of technical difficulties. So we'll just move on to the next question. And if he comes back, we'll bring him into the next question. So this one is really focused on communication. And so I would say that I think it's communication is discussed a lot of different ways, especially across forums like this, right? Whether or not we're understanding more translation needs that help us get from data to decisions, understanding that there are certain people that have roles that better interpret, you know, what types of decisions need to be made and what kind of information is needed in order to support that. But it could also be just being able to say, okay, I know that this person has what I need. Let me reach across the aisle. Let me make sure that what I need can be received from an interagency partner or a partner that we've developed. But then also during a disaster, we know a lot of times that the communication channels that we've worked so hard to develop are not always available. And so when responding to disasters, the line of communications, you know, can really be frayed. They can be challenged, and it can make it quite difficult to achieve what you're trying to do in relation to managing risk, but also reducing the impact to lives and livelihoods. And so from your experience, what do you do to ensure these communication channels stay open across multiple jurisdictions and multiple sectors throughout the time that we are in crisis? Maybe just for fun, Nico, would you like to start, and then we'll move over?
Of course, yes. Happy to start. So I will give you two examples. Well, the example of New Zealand where I work right now, and an example in Vietnam as well, where I lead a project at the moment. So in New Zealand, as I was mentioning, we have this structure where there is an agency coordinating at national level. Then there's the provincial level where all the local government actually are in charge of implementing disaster risk management, and then there are the local communities, and so basically, the roles and responsibilities are clear. We know what each agency needs. For example, the central government, they're interested in funding risk management activities, so we need to provide them information that is connected to that. So us, as a scientific institution, we provide scientific evidence at all those levels, and we try to communicate the information this way. However, something that I've noticed is that sometimes, even though us scientists have access to all those levels, actually, the levels of government themselves do not necessarily communicate to each other more as efficiently. And I think our responsibility as scientists that sometimes we try to get them in the same room to talk to each other. And so to clarify what I'm saying, so I'm going to use now an example of a project I lead in Vietnam. So in Vietnam, we're trying to assess disaster risk associated with hydrological dams failure. So let's say there's an earthquake or a landslide that destroys the dam will fail, it's going to flood the basin, and basically it's going to impact all the local communities. And us as scientists, we do work with the management companies, for example, managing those dams. We try to assess the risk and communicate information to them. But then also we talk to local communities and we try to explain how can they, well, first the role of dams in managing floods, but also in case of an emergency, what can they do? But what we've noticed is that actually the management companies of the dams, in case of an emergency, do not necessarily talk to the local communities when there is an emergency. And so we basically think that we try to actually connect them, making them in advance of disasters in order to be better prepared, to be able to communicate to each other and try to identify mechanism to discuss in case of an emergency. And it's not something that is achieved yet. Thank you.
Thank you. Rafael?
Thank you. Creo que la respuesta de Nicolás fue bastante amplia y acertada. Sin embargo, desde la óptica del gobierno, creo que sería importantísimo poder coordinar y sistematizar a todas las instituciones de un Estado o del gobierno para que manejen y tengan acceso a información de primera mano al momento. Y posteriormente, una vez creada esta sistematización, poder incluir a los diferentes recolectores de información, pudiendo ser considerados sociedad civil. Entonces, básicamente creo que esa sería la solución, o una de ellas. Gracias.
Thank you. I mean, from a NASA perspective, it's an interesting question because I think like what each of you are saying has different elements for us. I think one of the things that I've noticed, especially as I've taken over the new position as the disaster manager, is the fact that we have clear-cut roles and responsibilities within the government, but a lot of those things bleed over. And so understanding really like, you know, how much can you do? How flexible can the government be in different times? You know, even if you create the best communication system and you put everything in place, you know, are we able or nimble enough to act as surge capacity in some capacities, you know, to other institutions? And so, you know, as a science institution, maybe you're not thinking, you know, NASA is going to help support you in an operational sense, but sometimes that happens. And so figuring out, you know, how much, and that comes along with its own risks in my mind. So I think figuring out not only what effective channels are, but then understanding sometimes, you know, who you can work with, what information you can get from them, and how it's going to help you ultimately achieve what you're hoping to do, even if it exceeds the roles and responsibilities of those that you're working with. So what does that mean? I mean, there's a lot, I think, to unpack there. This brings us, though, to our last question. And I would say, I guess maybe for me, this is one of the questions that I think is a little bit more interesting, because for a while, Now, I've only worked for NASA for about 5 years, and it's been interesting working in an institution that is about advancing science and technology. And I come from a background where I'm more used to thinking about the human dimension, about humanitarian issues. And so when I go to different events where we're talking about what the future holds, I'm always looking for this concept of how we're going to be doing things to make lives better for all of us, as humans, right, around the world. And I know that there's this bigger picture question that's always coming up about data harmonization, where our technologies are going, where AI and ML is, but how do we balance some of these directional things that by definition are going in one direction, which is technology advancement at any cost, versus some of the increasing risks that we're seeing happen around the world. And so my question here is, how do you balance advancing your own understanding of risk with the demands of evolving technology? So this is essentially saying, is technology good no matter what? Is there something that we need to do to better consider how we understand risk, along with the fact that sometimes technology is advancing more rapidly than what we can integrate, what we have capacity for, or what we even understand? Rafael, would you like to take this?
Yes, of course. La verdad es una pregunta bastante compleja. Sí, la tecnología es una herramienta que ha venido a dar muchas soluciones a la sociedad en general. Creo que la tecnología implementada de la manera correcta y adecuada y pudiendo dirigirla hacia el bienestar de toda la humanidad, pues es algo que debemos de aprovechar y explotarlo a toda costa. Creo que si logramos, por ejemplo, si lográsemos nosotros en Honduras, porque me gusta hablar de mi país, porque es a quien represento en este foro, si lográsemos nosotros, por ejemplo, desarrollar una aplicación que pudiera tener una cobertura nacional, sería de bastante colaboración para nosotros como gobierno, porque hay, como dije anteriormente en la respuesta a una de las preguntas, realmente nosotros nos estamos nutriendo de información de personas, de noticieros que tienen cobertura pues a nivel nacional, de la gente que llama a estos noticieros poniendo se está inundando tal lugar o cuestiones así. Entonces sí creo que la tecnología va en buen camino. No considero que se esté utilizando para una cuestión no adecuada y pues sí me gustaría que se pudiera explotar a toda costa esto en mi país. Muchas gracias.
Okay, it looks like we've been joined again by Rafael. I mean, not by Rafael. Rafael's with us. I'm so sorry, Rafael. By Renato. And so I'm going to repeat the question so that we can include Renato in the last question. So, Renato, data and technologies are advancing faster than our understanding of risk. And these capabilities can be incredibly expensive, which can reduce budgets for more common tools that can be used to understand risk. Given this, how would you balance advancing your own understanding of risk with the demands of evolving technology?
Well, essentially, since I'm with the government, we developed a technology that is participative. We actually allow free access to our platform by developing applications that were developed by our own organization. If you want to input data, we have the GeoMapper, and if you want to do analysis by village, by communities, by towns or provinces, we have developed the geoanalytics. So essentially, the local governments may be able to use the technology freely. What they need to do is to provide the data, and the input are also provided with the standards and codes that can be used all over the country so that we will have a nationally consistent data set. So in essence, the government coordinates all this, and the local governments would provide the necessary information so that we have a seamless coordination What needs to be done, though, is to translate this data set into action at the lowest level of governance, where they do the preparedness given the hazards and risk assessment already provided to them online.
I mean, the point on open access is definitely, I think, an interesting component. How, I think not only does it make the data and the information and the codes and everything that we're developing more accessible to people, but then it allows people to play in an environment, or at least participate in an environment that maybe, helps them sustain and maintain and take over some of these capabilities in a way that reduces, the need of others to sustain it. So, excellent point. Nico, do you have thoughts on this that you'd like to add?
Yes, I may have a couple of points. I mean, I'd say I think we should be able to embrace innovation, and welcome it, because I think it is really where we make a difference between the business as usual risk assessment and then how we can evolve. And for example, the democratization of satellite imagery is an absolute revolution. When I did my PhD thesis like 15 years ago, it used to cost $1 million to have one image, and you would spend 3 years analyzing it. And now you have access to satellite imagery all over the world every 6 hours for very cheap costs. So that's actually, it's not necessarily contradictory with being more expensive. Actually, you can actually be more efficient. Having said that, on the other hand, you also need to be mindful of the fact that new technology includes new biases and new uncertainties. And so, for example, when it comes to artificial intelligence, it's also amazing, but it comes also with its own biases. It could be based, on learning from past experience, when past experience is not necessarily representative of the future. So you also need to be mindful of the new uncertainty you introduce in your assessment. So I think from a technical point of view, that's what I would say. Now, from a practical point of view, to be very blunt and very honest, I'd say that even us, if we know that we need to update our risk assessment or use new technology, for example, because cities are growing and an assessment you do in a given year is not good enough anymore 10 years later, because you have more population, more people seem to do that. However, as scientists, we are constrained by the budget we receive, and we receive grants for a given period of time. And once this budget is done, then it's kind of very difficult to do it again. So even before thinking, from a physical point of view, is it good to use new technologies or not? The reality is that we need to be able to also have a sustainable model to do research, to science, in order to progress those issues, and not being stuck every 2-3 years having to reinvent the wheel and try to wait until the next round of funding comes in. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico. So I'm going to do one thing, because I think you brought up an important topic, and maybe it's a surprise question to everyone that's here and participating. But essentially, we started out understanding that there is a challenge that arises from balancing the data, balancing the communication, balancing access, and then getting all of those issues or challenges that we're experiencing and moving them towards decisions that are not just a random decision, but something that you can feel confident in, that is a good one and that's going to save lives. And so given all of the trade-offs, and I'm going to take your cue on this because you mentioned, some things are just going to be demanding inherently. And so from, I guess, all of the things that we've discussed, maybe each of you could tell all of us here, at least one thing that you're excited about when it comes to like where we are moving forward. What things do you think are going right that you would like to have everyone leave with a positive thought on moving forward? Raphael, do you think you'd like to take that one? Do you want to be given a few seconds to think about it? Yeah? Okay, so I'm going to pick on Nico, and then we'll move to Renato and then Raphael.
Well, essentially, I'm excited with the new applications that the Philippine government has developed together with the World Bank. The Department of Science and Technology has extended the applications that we have done, where we have developed an automated planning guide so that communities can have a pre-disaster risk assessment and automated planning how to respond after a disaster. So this is an application that would guide every town or city. They just type the name of the town or the city, and all the hazards and risk assessment will be automatically done by the application, and they will be guided as to the intervention options that they can choose. And in the end, they push a button, and voila, a recovery plan report is already ready to be submitted to the local government officials and even to the national government. So I'm excited about this.
That's awesome. You sound excited, but I think it sounds really fascinating too. So thanks for sharing it with us. Nico, over to you.
Yes, actually, for me, there are three things I'm very excited about. So number one, as you were mentioning in your first question, even though I think there's a lack of harmonization of data, I think we're also going towards that. There's a lot of initiatives out there that are doing this, like the Global Earthquake Model, like Oasis, like Riscape here in New Zealand. So I think we're going slowly towards better harmonization. That's point number one. Point number two, you were mentioning big data and new technology. I think also the use of this big data and new technology is also amazing, because natural hazard risk is actually not static. It's a dynamic risk, and city growth, climate changes, and all of that, we are more and more able to basically dynamically assess it and keep risk assessment up to date. So that's number two. And number three, I think because we're going toward more and more inclusion of social vulnerability estimation, so trying to address not just the physical damage of risk, but or the economic impact. Now we're getting more indicators around people having access to health, access to education, income and revenues. And so we have a better idea on how to assess the risk associated to those communities and how to better target them and provide better solutions. So that's my last point, and I find that's quite exciting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nico. Rafael.
Thank you. Bueno, en nuestro caso creo que yo sí estoy de acuerdo con la inteligencia artificial, porque nos permite en muchas ocasiones a los tomadores de decisión pues sistematizar toda la información, y que eso nos permita a nosotros pues tomar la decisión adecuada, podamos ver todos los escenarios posibles y no podamos incurrir en algún error. En cuanto a Honduras, pues actualmente se pretende implementar lo que es el gobierno digital, lo que va a permitir, que me imagino que en muchos de sus países ya fue implementado, pero esto va a permitir pues una respuesta más rápida y efectiva hacia la población, que va a devenir en reducción de muchos gastos y incluso favorecer a la naturaleza. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Okay, I think at this time we are going to close this session, but I want to thank you so much to all of you for participating, and engaging in this. Nico, your thoughts, Renato and Rafael, thank you so much, for your perspectives on this. And I think that there's something fun happening soon. So yes. Thank you all.
Thank you.